folks. Saber4 here. Wanted to come back in with a second video in our little series looking at math in the game and kind of how we do things. With the first two rare bases, we put out a couple of decks with it. And now that we have the final two, I just wanted to go back and kind of crunch through the numbers and talk a little bit about how these work. So this is Changing the Math Part 2, and we're going to look at the statistical impacts of rare bases on your card draw. For the ground rules here, we're going to make two basic assumptions. Number one is that we are always going to use the least number of cards possible in our deck. And number two is to let you know that all probability assumes no replacement. So step outside of Star Wars for a second and consider a deck of playing cards. 52 cards, 4 suits, 13 cards apiece. If we want to shuffle and get a fair shuffle and draw a king, what is the probability that we're going to do that on our first draw or on any given draw? So to do that, what we do is that we take the number of desirable results and we divide that by the number of total possible results. In the case of drawing a king on our first draw, that is 4 out of 52 or 1 in 13, a 7.7% chance. So what about the next one? And this is how that kind of breaks down, and this is where you go with this, is that if we didn't draw 1 the first time, our next draw will be 4 in 51, which is 7.8, so the odds go slightly up. What about if we want to draw 1 in our first 4 cards? Well, we're going to do something called negative outcome probability. So what that is that we use the chance of a negative outcome and we multiply a series of them together until we find the total number of chances of what we're going to do. Drawing anything other than the king on your first draw is 48 and 52. Then it's 47 and 51, 46 and 50, until we either get our hand size or we get what we wanted to draw. And then we multiply each of those things together to get our undesirable outcome total. The math is right there for you. You can see that if you do that 4 times, you get a 72% chance of drawing no king in the first 4 cards. To understand the positive side of that you wanted to get your draw right, 1 minus the undesirable result. So we would get a king about 28% of the time. So what does that mean for Star Wars Unlimited? Well, we have access to a lot more than just 4 of a... We have access to at least however many cards we want to put in. We have access to multiple copies of single cards. We have access to 3 apiece, or in certain cases now 15 apiece of single cards. And that gives us kind of our baseline for how we're going to start. Understanding negative outcome probability isn't going to be something that you need to do if you want to sit down and work a thematic deck and you want to play, you want to play with your friends and do a trench run and see if you can manage to stop the trench run for Luke with Darth Vader. This doesn't apply. Where this applies is if you are going to sit down and play your store showdown, if you're going to sit down and go to a planetary qualifier, if you're going to sit down and play any kind of competitive level of event. Because what you want to do is that you want to make sure that in things like best of 3s, I don't want to lose a game before I start it. And what I mean by that is that if I go and I sit down and I draw just a total brick of an opening hand, I'm probably not going to do very well. Well, when I have the mulligan, I want to know that if I drew a brick, what are my chances that I'm going to do that twice, right? And that kind of guides my choices for how many turn 1 plays I put in. It also guides my choices for how many turn 2 plays I put in, for how often am I going to get started and get rolling with what I want to do in my early game so that I'm not far behind when we get to the mid and late game. And so this is going to help with large multi-round events and kind of talk about where our goals are and what we want to do in order to adjust the math of our deck to get the most favorable outcomes for us. If your deck has just one goal, and that is to not brick, and we're flying kind of low with our second hand, simple calculation, exactly what we did at first. If we have multiple goals, then we chain those multiple probabilities together and kind of find out what's there. You'll see a little bit of that in each of these. So we're going to talk first about vanilla math. And when I say vanilla math in this whole video, what we're talking about is that we're talking about any 50 card deck with a 6-card draw, just the baseline of what they gave us when we started playing Star Wars Unlimited. This applies to the rare bases in the first couple of sets. Actually, in the first 3 sets. This will not apply to the rare bases in the new set, which is what this is about. So, vanilla math on a 60-card opening hand. What are your chances that you're going to draw a turn 1 play, considering that you want to be able to do that every time? I started at 10 cards. You could go lower than this, and the math still works its way down, but I wanted you to see where the progression is, and to understand that it's about 2 percentage points per card of working our way down or up. 10 cards, I want to draw at least 1 2-drop. Turn 1 play. Doesn't mean it has to be a unit, just at least 1 2-drop. The chances that I'm going to draw at least 1 in my opening hand with 10, 82%. Moving up, if we go to 11, 12, 13, we can get all the way up to 89%. What about if I have to mulligan? Well, that's the second part there. What's the chances that I'm going to draw no turn 1 play and then draw no turn 1 play again? You can see that if you're sitting on 13 of your turn 1 plays, you've got like a 1% chance of blanking twice. And that's important for those, like I said, larger events, multi-round events. You know, you sit down at a PQ and you're going to go 6 rounds, 7 rounds, 8 rounds. The odds that you're going to blank at least 1 opening hand probably are going to hit. But the odds that you're going to blank twice, multiple times, are going to be really, really low the more of those turn 1 plays that you put in. What about getting a turn 1 play and setting yourself up for the second turn? So here we're going to consider something like ramp, right? Which is a 6-card package. If you want both in your opening hand, we're going to take the probability of a 1 in 6 event and the probability of a of a 1 in 6 event out of 50 and a 10 through 13 event out of 50. And they're right here on your screen. So what's the probability that I'm going to draw both a turn 1 play and a 1 in 6 turn 2 play? If I've got 10 turn 1s, 55% that it's going to happen. If I have 13 turn 1s, it's a 60% chance that it's going to happen. And each of those mean that like I can be a little bit more aggressive to think that like I've got a pretty good chance of rebounding into this if I mulligan. And this will kind of guide how aggressively you can be with that. The bottom part here is one of those little added parts that we wanted to talk in and get to the math behind it. What if I have an answer, right? What's the chance to draw any one specific card that I have a 3 of in my opening hand? Well, any single 3 of in your opening hand in a 50 card and 6 draw is about 30%. By the time I've drawn my next 2 cards, so at the end of that round, the chances that I will have drawn an answer goes up to 41, then 49, then 57 as I go through the first 4 turns. So let's look at some of those new bases. The Colossus gave us a 35-point base and gave us 1 less card in our starting hand. So it's a smaller hand size. My opening hand now sees 10% of my deck instead of 12. 10 turn 1 plays, now my odds decreased because I didn't get to draw the 6th card. A 10 card target dropped me from 84% to 74%, from 82% to 74. To get to that baseline requires that I go back up to 13 turn 1 plays. And if I wanted to reach that 87% threshold that we get at 12 cards in the vanilla math, I've got to still go up another 3 cards to 15. Really, this base requires a draw engine of some sort, and I've listed some of them there for you. Cassian and Palpatine from Spark of Rebellion both contain direct card draw. Dr. Pershing is already an aspect. General Hux is a new one that is in the aggression aspect. Villainy has access to No Bargain, or I Am Your Father, but I Am Your Father, you're not guaranteed their choice. Remnant Reserves will require a command villainy leader, and then Mission Briefing will require that you play this with aggression. I included the specific cards and the specific answer cards, or just you have a 3 of and you want to draw 1 of it. The same math applied there, and I'm going to use those in each of the slides, but I'm not going to walk you through them. The next base that we got was the Thermal Oscillator, a smaller deck. And so a smaller deck increases the odds that I am going to draw a particular thing. 5 fewer cards changes in a 50 card. Any 3 of, you're talking 6% of your deck, because every card is 2%. In a 45 card deck, each card is 2.2%. So you've got a 10% rise in value in exchange for 10% base health. So this is a 27-point base. Minimum deck size decreased by 5. We jump up to an 86% for a turn 1 play on just 10 cards. Now, if we're really looking at this, and I'm starting to put decks together that include this, I'm very rarely finding myself using something other than a core group of 15 cards. So most likely I'm going to be running 12. And the probability of drawing a turn 1 play and ramp, probability of drawing a turn 1 play with 12 is 90%. And if I use ramp, or if I use any other 6 of a certain group, then the probability that I'm going to get that at least one turn 1 play, and at least one of my 1 of 6 is 65%. So with Thermal Oscillator, know that you can be very aggressive with your mulligan to set yourself up for your first 2 plays. Really, it's possible to aggressively mulligan to your first 3 if you have multiple things that you're okay with playing in your first round. So if you weren't looking at ramp, if you were concerned on building a 3-drop unit and you wanted to chain your way all the way up to your 4th turn, you really could mulligan aggressively if you only cared that you're getting a 1 of 12 and a 1 of 9 and another 1 of 9. You really can be aggressive to get to the hand that you want to play this deck very consistently. Specific answers again, and we wanted to see that these went up pretty significantly. I'm going back to the vanilla math here just to show you that we went up from 32 up to 35, again about a 10% increase on just our opening hand, and then it progresses upwards a little bit faster from there. What about a larger deck? So this is the first of the 2 new bases, and we're going to talk about the Data Vault. We're keeping the same draw, so we're keeping the same number of cards that we drew in our opener. We're keeping the same number of cards that we draw per turn, but our deck size increased by 10 cards. So at the benefit of 3 health, we went to a 60-card deck. Now each individual card drops from 2% of the deck to 1.67. Because of the larger pool, this has the same requirements as Colossus of 15 cards that are turn 1 plays to reach an 87% opening hand with at least 1. However, with a new 10 cards, I only have to surrender 3 of those to be turn 1 plays in order to make that happen. And so my math allows me to add 7 cards that are out into what I want for the rest of the game, add in only 3, and keep a consistent piece of math with my vanilla. This dropped our specific answers pretty significantly because we added 10 cards to the pool. We're still at 50% to draw any one specific card by the end of our third draw, but it does change the math in here. And the final one, no second chances. This is the Nabat Village. We use the same vanilla math, except that we have to run it out to 9 places instead of 6. Here, instead of seeing 12% of our deck, as we would in vanilla, we're going to see 18%. We're going to see 50% more of our deck in the opening hand. We're going to know that 3 of those cards are on the bottom. Whichever 3 we didn't care about and we're kind of throwing away. We're going to do the same opening, except that when we talk about our biggest advantage here comes with specific card draws and consistency. In order to see at least one turn 1 play, 10 cards, which was kind of our floor for the others, we jumped all the way up to a 95% chance to see at least one turn 1. There's no second chance, so if you whiff, that's it. But things like Han don't care, right? So if you're pairing this with yellow Han, for example, it doesn't matter if you had a 2-cost card. He puts down a resource. You get you play 3. But this just means that you get to see a much larger part of your stack. And as you're seeing here at the bottom of this, you're going to get a big chance to be able to draw well into your deck and well into your specific answers, but with the drawback of no second chances. So anyway, I hope that you are enjoying the Jump to Lightspeed spoilers and ready for this, which is like a month out now. Yeah. If you like this video, if you like the content that we're putting out here, the other stuff that I've done has looked at some of these and created decks with them. I will do a little bit more of that later, but I wanted to get this out here and talk about some of that core math behind the game and understanding how it impacts how you build. Please like the video if you get a chance. Subscribe to the channel, and it will help us out. Thanks for being here.